I'm Jim Czek. You're watching Kelowna Now, and I have with me Ian Burns on the phone, and we're going to get into the daily need to know. We're going to start off with Canadians less happy now than they were the year that Trudeau took office. Does that surprise you at all, there, Ian?
Yeah, I don't imagine it surprised many people.
No.
To their credit, though, or discredit, whichever way you look at it, the pollster Angus Reid, they didn't actually mention that was the year that Trudeau came to power. Instead, they spoke about things like COVID and inflation. But I mean, you can't help but notice that corresponds precisely with the Trudeau government's time in office.
Yeah, there was an Elon Musk retweet out there that showed where he had took power in Canada's GDP breaking away from the United States. That's all over the internet as well.
Yeah, that's something very good about X, actually. Elon's platform is that it's a great place to go for charts and graphs and things. And there are quite a lot of Trudeau of graphs related to Trudeau that I'm sure they aren't very happy about. One is obviously house prices. We've all seen that one. I think Pierre Poilievre has used that one, hasn't he?
Yep.
And then population, and obviously now we have happiness to add to it as well.
Yeah, obviously it's the pocketbook that relates to that for sure for most Canadians, right? Just being able to put food on the table and gas in the car. And I just did a live stream with Renee Merrifield, our weekly show now that we're doing Beyond the Ballot. And there's a study that came out supporting that the carbon tax is actually increasing the price of food, even though the Liberal government has denied that over and over.
Yeah, there's been a lot of studies that have said that as well. Yeah, it's something that they're sticking to, but it doesn't affect.
Common sense as it is, we live in the second largest landmass nation in the world, and we have to use a lot of trucks, tractors, and trains to move our products across this nation and into the grocery store and into your home. Obviously, energy costs factor into all of that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard to buy the argument, isn't it? I don't think many people believe it, but
yeah, I mean, it's not just the price you pay at the pump, which is, for a lot of people too much, but it's everything that we consume, everything you've done since you woke up this morning relates to energy. And if you increase the input cost of energy, obviously that's going to flow through in everything that you do.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
I would say, like on both sides of the border, the Liberal government and the Democrats tend to avoid things like common sense.
Well, yeah, I suppose the argument would be more abstract ideals on the one hand, and then kind of practical day-to-day things on the other hand. Yeah, and I would say the Liberals and the Democrats, especially with climate change, you could definitely accuse them of being a little bit more concerned about abstract arguments. Yeah.
We've got now 2 port shutdowns, risking damage to the Canadian economy. And then sounds like the federal government's going to move on that and end those port strikes with binding arbitration.
Yeah, and interestingly, considering what you just said there about carbon tax and the economy and whatnot, the Labour Minister, Stephen McKinnon, the guy that's done this, made this happen, a quote from him this morning is, "Canadians have limited tolerance right now for economic self-harm," which I find very interesting in light of the carbon tax.
They should say that out loud a few times till it starts to click, till it starts to settle in, right? I mean, this is another one where Jagmeet Singh should be opposing the federal government because he says he's always about the workers. And here it is again that they've ordered binding arbitration, which is something he's not for.
Yeah, well, I find like the NDP and left-wing parties around the whole Western world are in a very difficult position because often there's a contradiction, isn't there, between their stated aims of helping the working man and then, again, what we said earlier, they're more abstract aims, things like climate change and all the rest of it. And there's definitely a conflict there on the left that needs to be resolved.
Yeah, and then there's that other strike that's or threatened strike with Canada Post, and that question will anyone notice that one? I mean, I shouldn't say that kind of like jokingly, but I mean most people they do a lot of parcel stuff right now, but most people's stuff comes by email. And I know there was once a floated idea out there, but I can't remember which government, where they're going to charge a tax on each email you send, kind of like a postage stamp.
Don't think that'd be very popular.
Yeah, I don't think it flew, but I mean, they did float it out there to see how well it would do. But
yeah. Well, in their media release that came through to us earlier this morning, they do admit that they're in trouble. You know, they say that they're rapidly falling behind in the competitive parcel delivery market, and that they apparently lost $490 million in their operations sector just in the first half of this year. So they know they're in trouble.
I mean, the delivering the mail is less and less important to most people. I can't even remember the last time I checked the mailbox, and my wife goes I think we go once a month or something like that, because most stuff either comes electronically or, through other postal delivery services, right?
Yeah, I think they need to figure out a new business plan, but it just depends what is it going to be, really. They just need to come up with the answer.
Well, that's one where they should look at that Crown Corporation and say, how much does it cost every year, and how much benefit does it bring, and how much could the private sector take on?
Yeah, well, it did used to be very sensitive, didn't it? Much like sort of energy production and things like that. It used to be one of the few things that the state actually had exclusive responsibility for, didn't it? The mail service.
Yeah.
And it's often like the oldest company in any country. Like, I think the U.S. Postal Service is older than like most of their institutions. But the times have changed. It's no longer what it was.
So the immigration minister says not everyone is welcome in Canada. They're concerned about the Trump deportation plan. We've been talking about this for quite a while, even when Trump first announced that he's going to do this massive deportation that we talked about. Likely that'll lead to a lot of people fleeing to Canada instead of getting deported back to their country of origin.
Yeah, and it also happened. It already has happened on a smaller scale than what's predicted. During the Trump presidency, there were a lot of Haitian people that were, that for whatever reason, Trump changed the laws about asylum, and they ended up coming to Canada. And that was, they came through that Roxham Road, which is just a crossing into Quebec, like just a normal sort of road that leads into Quebec from the US. And there's a worry that it's going to be a repeat of that.
Well, I mean, interestingly, the Quebec premier has said we don't want anybody else or more people, so they're just going to push them out as well. Kind of like going to be like the Greg Abbott, push them to Ontario or somewhere else.
Yeah, British Columbia, as David Eby was furious about, wasn't he, when you spoke to him?
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see, because it sounds like that maybe the Trump administration is softening a bit and saying, like, there is a path to immigration, just has to be done the right way. And so it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. But Canada, it's definitely no position to take on millions and millions of people with already stressed healthcare and stressed housing.
Well, also, if you read the article, it's political suicide, because the majority of Canadians, according to a poll that they commissioned for this story, majority of Canadians don't want any more refugees. They actually want fewer. It's just the whole migration dialogue has become in this territory, hasn't it, in politics, and I think the Liberals are going to be very reluctant to lose more of the things.
And then Trump's expected national security advisor praises Poilievre and has attacked Trudeau in the past. So there's definitely already, this adversarial relationship starting to build between these two. I mean, the Trudeau government has said so many negative things about Donald Trump and used him as the boogeyman for even Pierre Poilievre on countless times.
Yeah, I think he's going to come to rue that appearance he made on Stephen Colbert's show. Colbert said what you said, where you referred to Poilievre as Canada's Trump, and Trudeau just thought that and smoked and then spoke about liberal values and everything. It's kind of, that's not going to go down well, is it?
I think we're losing you a bit there. You're softening up there. You still there?
Yeah. Is it okay now?
Yeah, it is.
I'm just saying they're going to rue that. I think the Trudeau administration is really going to regret a lot of those comments. I think, and it's the same. It's the same in England as well. Some incredibly, unbelievably stupid comments that have been made by the foreign minister in England about Trump, including saying that he would lock himself to the gates of Downing Street to prevent Trump from coming to visit and things like that. It's kind of, there's a lot of dirty laundry that's now coming out.
Well, I guess he should go buy himself a lock, I guess, or something, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's not just this guy. It's not just Mike Waltz as well, we should say, because Marco Rubio, widely expected now to become Secretary of State, pretty much the number 2 or number 3 after the Vice President in the administration. And he is no fan of Trudeau and really excoriated Trudeau when Fidel Castro died. And Trudeau was perceived to have been very flattering of Fidel Castro. And obviously Rubio, like a lot of people in Florida, I believe he's one of the descendants of the Cuban refugees that fled Castro. So just things like that's not going to play well, especially when Florida is like the epicenter of Trumpism now, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and then we've got the USMCA deal and an Ontario premier attacking Mexico over Chinese cars, and definitely the Chinese have used Mexico as a landing pad to start building some of their cars, and China is building cars like you wouldn't believe, and way cheaper, and they're trying to use Mexico as a way to get them into the Canadian and American markets.
Yeah, I mean, it's very strong language from Doug Ford, actually, and some people have characterized that his comments as him claiming that he wants Mexico kicked out of that deal, and he wants it just to be the US and Canada, but I'm not really sure whether there's much hope of that, because Mexico is seen as extremely valuable to the United States for manufacturing and that kind of thing.
Just that new shipping route to get across, do you know what I mean? Like that they built to bypass the Panama Canal. I mean, to them, that's probably a very integral part of their whole trade.
Yeah. But it's also their primary, if they want to get off China as the lower wage manufacturer, their primary target is Mexico to fill that role. So Canada doesn't have the population to rival Mexico in that regard. So I doubt that Canada is going to be chosen.
Mexico is the United States' largest trading partner, a role we used to have, but through, again, poor policy and that we have lost that role. So I don't think, what Doug Ford says is going to have a lot of weight.
No, I think maybe it's just a signaling to say, just like Chrystia Freeland, for example, in every single press appearance she's made since Trump was elected, she's said about how hard she's going to be on Chinese imports and things like that. I think it's just a signal to Trump that, we can be friends on this subject, on the matter of China. Yeah,
I think that the sad reality is that this current government has said so many bad things about Donald Trump and used him as the boogeyman against Pierre Poilievre.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to take a while. It's going to take a while to clean that up, I think.
And then Liberals face their third test in a federal by-election in BC this month. Pierre Poilievre actually in British Columbia right now. He's in Princeton today.
Yeah. Oh, I thought he was going to Penticton as well, maybe? Or is it Princeton?
Yeah, I think
he's definitely nearby.
Yeah. So there you go. So there's that by-election, and that seat has kind of flipped back and forth over the years. So I would assume if you're a betting person, you might want to bet on Conservative.
Yeah, it's just been relentlessly bad news in by-elections, hasn't it? It's been, that one in Toronto was the real shocker, I think. But there doesn't seem to be much chance that they'll retain it.
I did an article on pay zero tax in BC on your next car. Oh, no, that's not it. I guess we don't have it up there, but there's an article. We're going to put it up on Kelowna Now later today. How you can get away with paying zero sales tax on your next purchase of your car. there's a severe disadvantage for British Columbians versus Albertans in taxation. I did a whole table there comparing purchasing different vehicles. So you can take a look at that. And we'll have that up at some point later today. Then there's some other news, just that we had some roundup stuff. The Harris campaign actually gave Oprah Winfrey $1 million US to appear. So there actually is a price on democracy, right? Apparently it's $1 million.
Well, we should say that Oprah she's rejected that characterization of what happened. She says that money was actually just given to her production company, and it just paid for the set and all the rest of it, so that she could host because it was like a set of interviews, wasn't it? It was Jennifer Lopez, Ben Stiller, and some other people.
Yeah, there's some receipts.
She said it wasn't a fee; it was just to cover that.
Yeah, and then there was they're saying $10 million paid to Beyonce.
I mean, yeah, I would have to see the details on that one, but it's it's not a good look, is it? When as you say, it was all about rescuing democracy and standing up for principles and so on. But yeah, I think there needs to be a bit more investigation into where this money actually went. But yeah,
they went through $1 billion and actually overspent by 20 million. And I guess Donald Trump has put out on his media outlet that he's willing to cover it.
Yeah, I think he's being a little bit arch there, but yeah, it's not it's not a good look, that is it? That she had massively out fundraised Trump and didn't really manage those funds very well. It doesn't appear to be the case anyway, and that is quite an embarrassment.
Yeah, the post-mortem on a lot of the CNN, MSNBC is saying that, like where they missed the boat is they didn't have their own Joe Rogan or Elon Musk or RFK. The irony of that is that all three of those were part of the Democratic Party at some point, and they felt that they were left behind, and they moved over to the new working class party, as they call it, the Republican Party, which seems to have connected with working class Americans more than the Democrats.
Well, not just those three, but there's also another individual that used to be a member of the Democratic Party, Donald Trump. So they've lost quite a lot, haven't they? And then there's Tulsi
Gabbard. Yeah, I think she's going to play a pretty prominent role in this new administration as well. A very well-spoken, articulate, powerful lady as well, right? And a veteran that served, I think, 24 years, a lieutenant colonel in the reserve right now.
Yeah, I've heard rumors that she might be put in to manage Veterans Affairs, but it will be interesting to see. I'm also very, very interested in what happens to Robert Kennedy, because there seems to be a lot of debate right now within the Trump camp about whether he's going to be given an official position and sort of rumors of betrayal. So that'll be a very interesting one to follow.
Mark Cuban's comment that Trump only surrounds himself with weak women seems to have not worn very well, with the appointment of Susie Wiles as chief of staff, first woman ever to be appointed chief of staff, and his campaign manager in the past as well. So
yeah. Well, also he had that Kellyanne Conway, who was quite a prominent figure, and I wouldn't imagine many people would consider her to be a weak woman.
Yeah, and then he just appointed Elsie Stefanik as the ambassador to the United Nations. Sounds like Kristi Noem of South Dakota is going to get an appointment. So all strong women for sure. Megyn Kelly, a former mainstream media anchor, and a Trish. There's tons of them out there, right? That definitely are part of his team, or have definitely picked Trump to win.
Yeah, you can see why a political opponent of Donald Trump would choose that as an attack line. Okay, I mean, he does have a questionable history with women in terms of his comments and whatnot. So I think that's literally just politicking. It's not true. It's just an attack, and like most attacks, it's kind of, there's a grain of truth to it, but it's really not accurate, is it, overall?
Yeah, I think like lots of times our greatest strength also becomes our greatest weakness, and Donald Trump's greatest strength is he's a bully, and it works really well in the national stage when he's, getting what he needs for America. But sometimes he probably doesn't know how to turn that off very well and comes across as a bully in areas that where he should be a lot softer.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, his penchant for praising himself perhaps is another one of his weaknesses. But then that is also kind of a strength because he's very optimistic. And when he talks about America, at least America under his guidance is the greatest country in the world, isn't it? I think people like that. I think boosterism.
That same argument could be made for Elon Musk. Like, he's probably our Thomas Edison of our times. Brilliant mind. Just doesn't know how to turn it off, and sometimes, puts stuff out there. And I think he even says it himself. Whoops, shouldn't have done that. But he wears it, and he owns it. So,
but that's important to mention, though, isn't it? That he owns it, because it's that that impression of authenticity, which seems to have been a deciding factor in the choice between Kamala and Trump for a lot of people. A lot of people decided that he was more of a real person, more honest with himself and more honest with other people. Whereas a lot of people, I think, looked at Kamala as choreographed and hesitant and not really all that genuine.
She would say different things to different audiences on the same topic. So
in different accents as well.
And even CNN is like, well, what's with this? Like, what's going on here, right? Like, you're literally saying the opposite to two different audiences, right? So, like, where is... Yeah. I think one of the things you could say, a lot of people say a lot of negative things about Elon Musk, and one of them is, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say, is that he's a liar.
Yeah, well, the big claims that he exaggerates that he gives a false timetable of when things are going to be produced and so on, but that's not quite the same as lying, is it? It's similar to Trump, actually. He's often accused of lying when more often it's exaggeration than outright untruths, isn't it?
Like Elon says it himself. He said, part of his downfall is he's very optimistic, and so his timelines tend to be very optimistic. And usually he fulfills. It just might not be in the timeline that you expect, or he said.
Yeah.
One of the things that you're seeing already in the world, nations stepping up and starting to fulfill their NATO obligations, their military spending. We're seeing this at the United Nations or European Union. Even Canada has said that it's going to start spending more money. That's one of Donald Trump's things: spend the money or risk not being protected by the United States military.
Yeah, and that's deemed to be an extraordinary transgression on his part, isn't it? And a sort of a crime against civilization and so on and so on. But you can definitely see the perspective of the Americans, who they look on at Europe with its universal health care, and the likes of France in that picture there. You see Macron. France has amazingly generous welfare system and pensions and so on. And I think a lot of Americans see that and they say, why are we spending so much money on defense to protect the likes of the French when they have better quality of life than us? They should spend that money. I mean, it makes sense, but I think it is a little bit scary as well to hear the possibility that the Western Alliance could actually split. But I think with Trump, as in with other things, it's all about negotiation, isn't it?
And then Bitcoin obviously took off. It called the election early as well, because Bitcoin took off as it realized that Donald Trump's going to win that election, touching as high as like 124,000, I think, in Canadian dollars. I think a little bit off this morning, but gold selling off a bit because of the strong United States dollar, right? So again, the markets, the dollar, and everything seems to be very pleased with a Trump election. That's the Bitcoin chart that's up there now, and then we were just talking about the gold one there. So gold off a bit. You can see when the election was called, and that the U.S. dollar gaining strength.
It's remarkable, and also the Dow Jones, I think it was, absolutely surged.
Yeah,
it's blown through 44,000.
The stock market definitely is very positive since the election. One of the things that there's some analysts out there calling for a recession, calling for higher inflation. I think one of the points they're missing, though, is Donald Trump has called for a real investment into oil and gas and securing energy for the Americans, and which means a larger amount of energy, and that would drive down the costs of energy, which we know that energy is tied to almost everything, so lower their inflation. And it may actually in turn strengthen the US dollar and make things tougher for Canadians for sure, but definitely make things a lot better in the US economy. So Canada has to figure out a way to tap our resources, and that may not come until we have a change in government.
Yeah, and something that's been happening now for a number of years, happened under Biden's presidency in a big way, is the return of manufacturing. That's expected to continue. Obviously, that's probably Trump's number one policy position, isn't it? To bring the jobs back. So there's also that to consider. And talking about energy, you look at Canada, it has some of the cheapest energy in the world, certainly in the developed world. And that, you would think, would make it a real hotspot for manufacturing. So maybe that could be the future for Canada.
Yeah, no, because I believe that Alberta could be the new Saudi Arabia of the world with small modular reactors, oil and gas, LNG, solar, wind. They have it all. And they have a premier that's very Alberta first premier. But she is definitely at odds with the energy minister of Canada. And I believe that is the thing that holds back prosperity for many Canadians right now.
Yeah, Alberta's certainly in a good spot. They also have food, which is another commodity that it's predicted is going to increase in value. And they've also got land, something that, BC, for example, doesn't have. They can just build basically wherever they want, can't they? They do have a lot going for them.
They've got kind of a flat slate there. Like, they don't have as many challenges as British Columbia does. Like, size of our cities is definitely, like, if we look in Kelowna, we have mountains all around us, whereas Alberta, like Calgary, keeps sprawling and sprawling and sprawling. Calgary is a beautiful city, and I think it's the third largest now. I can't remember exactly, but if you look on our ChatGPT friend, they can tell you how fast Calgary is growing, right?
Yeah, they just need to build that high-speed rail between Calgary and Edmonton.
Yeah.
Be a very, very easy thing to do, I imagine, with that flat land.
Yeah, no, definitely they don't have the amount of challenges that we do with, the mountains and that. And they do have mountains too. Some of the most beautiful parts of British Columbia that most people think are British Columbia are actually Banff, Jasper, and they belong to Alberta.
Yeah, and they've got that the Buffalo Park as well, haven't they, in the north?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else you want to chat about this morning?
I think we've touched on just about everything now.
Yeah. Any stories you're working on today?
Well, Bonnie Henry is going to be speaking a little later this morning, 11:30. She's going to be speaking about that bird flu case that's been identified in a person for the first time, and I think the first time ever in Canada, or certainly recently. So that'll be an interesting one. I'm going to follow that.
Yeah. I was just trying to, Calgary, it says ranks 5th in behind Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and Ottawa. Ottawa's metropolitan area.
Yeah, that includes part of Quebec.
Yeah,
but
no.
It's a funny one with Calgary and Ottawa. Yeah, they often overtake each other from year to year.
I think Calgary continues to grow. Calgary is definitely, a lot of British Columbians are choosing to go east. It used to be the old saying, go west, young man.
Yeah, cheaper housing. No sales tax. Like, again, go read that article I did on, it's going to be on Kelowna Now later today. I did an interview with the BC Car Dealers Association talking about the distinct advantage that Albertans have over buying a car. Like, just for an example, at a higher end, where we have the luxury tax, like say $140,000 pickup truck or SUV, there could be another third of that in added taxation. Whereas in British Columbia, you have a 7%, a graduated 7%. The PST is actually graduated based on the vehicle cost.
whereas in Alberta there is no provincial sales tax.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it would be understandable if the services provided in BC were dramatically superior to what's on offer in Alberta, but I don't really think that's the case. I don't think anybody really believes that's the case.
But there is,
in light of that, it's not so great.
There is a hack in there. There's a way to avoid paying any tax, and I'll leave that as a mystery. You can buy a vehicle in British Columbia and pay 0 sales tax. So you'll have to read it to find out. All right. We thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now.